2023 has been a special year for gaming. I've seen a lot of discussion and conversation on social media sites about this rivaling some of the best years ever in gaming, from 1998 to 2007, 2010, and so on. A lot of people pointing out that this year we've had Resident Evil 4 Remake, Hogwarts Legacy, Jedi Survivor, Tears of the Kingdom, Street Fighter 6, Final Fantasy 16, Baldurs Gate 3, Starfield, Cyberpunk 2077, Phantom Liberty, and Spider-Man 2. Still on the way, we have games like Alan Wake 2. It's been a great year, but I do think a significant reason why we've had such a great year in gaming, at least in terms of the overall amount of quality experiences, is the fact that we're feeling the repercussions or the consequences from the pandemic. And what do I mean by that? Well, development slowed across the board from 2020 to 2022, and finally we're seeing a lot of those games reach that finish line and they're releasing. We'll see how the release timelines and how many games we get in the next couple of years, but I do feel like we have an explosion in releases because of the fact that development was slowed. So that's why we've had so many games. But I do feel like 2023 has been a year that we've also seen a lot of bad from this industry. Now, obviously, Baldurs Gate 3, that is the new standard. I don't care what anybody says. There was lots of controversial statements coming from developers and pundits from within this industry saying, no, it's not. This cannot be it is a standard. Even in some of the reviews of games like Starfield, Cyberpunk 2077, Phantom Liberty, and even some of the pre-release discussions about Spider-Man 2, Baldurs Gate 3 and the impression that it left on this industry is being brought up, and that's going to be felt for the next number of months, maybe years, the same way Elden Ring is brought up in a lot of these discussions as well. Now, the thing about Baldurs Gate 3, which made it so special and why we just keep on talking about it, is the fact that its new standard was really an old standard, and a lot of the reasons why Larian was able to create this experience, I do think, is because they are an independent studio. They were able to take the risk that they needed to. They spent millions upon millions on this game, but they also had to earn the opportunity to work on this IP. Now, the thing about Larian and even From Software is that mostly they are independent studios. They can do these risks, but the likes of BioWare and many of the other major developers, publishers, they're sticking to what is known to be successful, and the only risk they are taking are on the more lucrative opportunities, which is, live services. Now, the thing about the future of this industry is that consolidation is here. We see that obviously with Xbox and Activision Blizzard, but we're seeing many other mega corporations like the likes of Disney and Comcast circling the waters, talking about major acquisitions of companies like Electronic Arts, Take-Two Interactive, CD Projekt Red, Ubisoft. That is what's going to happen the next couple of years, and I don't think it's going to be good for the health of this industry and having great experiences. That's why I do think the more enjoyable experiences are probably going to be coming from independent studios like Larian. Now, the thing about Baldurs Gate 3 also that it has is that there isn't any microtransactions, because they're not trying to make all the money in the world. They don't have investors necessarily that they have to satisfy. Their goal, as said by their CEO, is about making a great gaming experience for gamers, first and foremost, something that unfortunately we don't see often. Now, what they've also done is that they're embracing the identity. They're not turning away from turn-based combat. They're not chasing trends because, again, they're sticking to what Baldur's Gate is about, and they also don't feel the need to go down the rabbit hole of experimenting with what the casual audiences are going to like, because that's something that we've seen with a lot of these RPGs the last number of years, especially the ones that branch out into being huge behemoth IPs. They have to water things down, the mechanics, and it's created lesser experiences, which has made more hardcore fans and fans of, these older games very dissatisfied with the newer iterations. But another thing that Baldur's Gate 3 includes day one, which feels uncommon nowadays, is the fact that it is a feature-complete experience, an actual quality role-playing game full of freedom, choice, and consequence, which unfortunately is just something that we don't see often nowadays. It was years ago, but not anymore, because we live in the age of updates and patches, in which many developers and publishers believe they can fix games in the next coming months and years. We've seen that recently with Jedi Survivor, and a lot of the points that I'm making about Baldur's Gate 3 you're going to see in the last couple of months, the last year or so. Just so many experiences have been broken because of the fact that they have not been able to deliver what Baldur's Gate 3 did. This has absolutely nothing to do with the sheer amount of hours of content within the game and the scale of the experience. This has everything to do with what Baldur's Gate 3 represents of what this industry used to be all about, and unfortunately, because of greed, because of publishers rushing out experiences that aren't complete but trying to satisfy investors, we have gotten an industry that feels broken very often, not just for gamers but also developers, the people making these games. Now, throughout 2023, the big thing that has become noticeable is that there is a big bubble that it's right now popped. I think that's the best way to put it. Because yes, while we've had these fantastic releases, Resident Evil 4 Remake, Jedi Survivor and such, a lot of them have also had a lot of controversy associated with them. And then there's also been just a lot of development chaos that we've seen across the board from this entire industry. And I want to go over all that. I want to point out what has happened throughout 2023, over really the last 16 or so months, so it puts together a better picture of why gaming right now is not exactly in the greatest place, even if we are getting some great experiences. Poorly optimized, broken experiences that shouldn't have been launched in its current state, review copies not given out for a specific platform, and a suspect "our game runs like poo-poo on this platform" statement the day before launch. Terrible, lazy, licensed IP that sports PS2 era graphics, and embarrassingly bad gameplay, an experience that feels like it exists to just exist. That literally has just been the last week or two of gaming news. Assassin's Creed Mirage, it added de novo in a day one patch after reviews are published. This is one of those evil practices in which publishers try to get around controversy by doing this nonsense. Usually EA likes to do that with their microtransactions, and I just hate when developers do this sneaky ass shit. CD Projekt Red laid off about over 100 developers. I think the Gwent staff was fired, and there was also some cuts at the main Poland office, and the actual stock for CDPR fell about 30% after Phantom Liberty. And I think the real big thing with that is the fact that CDPR had to recapture the reputation. They had work to do, and it was always not going to be something that investors found favorable, but they had to do it. Mortal Kombat utilizes de novo, and a $70 Switch version pretty much looks like dog shit, pathetic. And they also used PC footage for marketing. Love this industry, love how deceptive they can be. The Metal Gear Solid Master Collection. Very interesting thing about that one is that the Switch port runs worse than on the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3, which I just find absolutely unacceptable, but it's perfectly in line with what we expect out of Konami. Red Dead Redemption, one of the best games of 2 generations ago on the Xbox 360 and PS3, it got a $50 port. Rockstar called it a new conversion, and it added nothing. It's a lazy port. That's the best way to describe it. It's unfortunate that this game didn't get a full-on remake, as some of the leaks and rumors had indicated a long time ago, but I guess Rockstar didn't want to do that. It's nice that the PS5 did finally get 60 FPS, but I'm not sure why that was never communicated to players that it was coming eventually. Overwatch 2, it's Overwatch 1. About that best thing I can say about it. It launched also with terrible monetization. Blizzard couldn't deliver on what it actually promised with this experience. You know, the big thing about Overwatch 2 was that it was going to have a huge PvE component. Well, that pretty much died. And while the game has taken a beating on Steam, Blizzard pretty much dismissed all the outrage, just saying that they were happy people are playing. It's just nonsensical how these developers don't listen to the criticism that they're getting with this total bullshit, in my opinion. Also Blizzard, they defended their mobile Diablo Immortal, which was pay to win. We had the president of Blizzard pretty much saying that 99% of the game was free, but he carefully ignored the fact that, yes, if you wanted to be competitive in the game's major PvP component, you had to cough up a lot of cash. And what's crazy about that is Diablo Immortal has microtransactions that if you want to fully spec out your character, I think it was estimated it would cost like $400,000 to $500,000. Just insane, which that's just the mobile games industry, unfortunately. Diablo 4, the live service Anger and Greed has been something that's been talked about endlessly the last couple of weeks. Blizzard also notably released one of the worst patches ever. The thing also with the monetization, it's one of those things that a lot of people just find it unacceptable with the prices that Blizzard's charging for certain cosmetics and stuff. Because no, I don't think if you have $20 to $30 microtransactions, no matter what, it's unacceptable in my opinion. I feel that way across the board, especially with Activision and Call of Duty, even though it has become normalized. And ironically enough, as I'm recording this video, there is outrage over a Diablo 4 character skin in Overwatch 2, which costs about $40. Jesus Christ. The Last of Us PC port launched pretty much pathetically. You can look at a lot of the pictures and stuff, it was unacceptable, and Naughty Dog unfortunately has done a poor job with fixing that up over the last couple of months. Forspoken, this was one of the early releases early on in the year, and a lot of us knew that it was not going to be very good. I think one of the reviews said that its use of storytelling tropes as well as character caricatures and cringy dialogue felt lazy and unimaginative at times. Yeah, that kind of tanked the reputation of the game, and also the fact that the open world and the mechanics of the game just looked pretty generic. The combat looked fun, but it just wasn't enough, especially when you have an unlikable protagonist and a story that is pretty boring. And unfortunately, because Forspoken sold lacklusterly, that's what Square Enix said, they shut down Luminous Productions, the developers behind the game, after this was their first game. Just very unfortunate. Last year, Gotham Knights, this was the follow-up to the Arkham trilogy, and unfortunately, I think it was WB Montreal that delivered this experience. They just didn't do enough here. The combat, the gameplay looked very mobile-esque. A lot of the systems looked convoluted and messy, and it was just another forgettable experience, unfortunately, coming from WB, and just a total misfire. Saints Row the Remake, this was something that a lot of us knew was going to be a total dumpster fire, and it was exactly that. Volition was mocked endlessly by fans on Twitter and social media in the come-up to the release and afterwards, and they just never listened. And based on some of the insider accounts that have come the last couple of months, it's quite clear the development was an absolute clusterfuck. And now Volition has been shut down. They were shut down right after their 30-year anniversary. Very disappointing. Destiny 2 has been deemed greedy. A lot of people bringing up some of the terrible monetization that they've brought to the experience, and also the fact that if you want to have the full Destiny 2 experience, you're pretty much going to have to invest hundreds upon hundreds of dollars, and a lot of the Bungie community overall is just very dissatisfied with the under-delivering with a lot of the content that has been produced. And while the game is free to play, I think a lot of the players have come to the conclusion that it's not. It really is a pay-to-play experience. I don't really need to get into Gollum. This is another game under the Embracer umbrella. Total disaster. The studio that developed that is now gone. And we're not going to see a Gollum 2, which was, I think they were exploring the idea of doing a Legolas game. That would have been probably terrible, but maybe hilarious to look at. It is worth mentioning that a recent insider expose on the development of Gollum outlined a horrendous work environment which was hostile at times with total mismanagement and a really horrific budget for such a beloved IP. It was under $15 million, in which they were supposed to make a fantastic AAA experience. Don't even know how that's possible in this day and age. And it was also mentioned that the apology, which called the Lord of the Rings IP Lord of Ring Gollum, it was made with ChatGPT, because as soulless as this experience was, it seems like the marketing and whoever was in charge of this studio was just as soulless. Redfall, that was another dumpster fire. It was supposed to be the big Xbox exclusive earlier on in 2023. It wasn't that. In recent weeks, it has been down to about 5 players on Steam, and it did rise recently to about 50 thanks to a huge patch. The patch brought 60 FPS finally, and many gameplay changes, fixes, and improvements, but again, you're going from about 5 to 10 players to 50 for a major release. That's just not good enough, and honestly, Arcane really should move on, but I know that they made some promises with some of the special editions, so DLC and such is probably still coming in the future. I just don't know if it's worth it, and I think a lot of us would want them to concentrate on a Dishonored 3, Prey 2, something else, instead of just Redfall, which is awful in so many ways. Jedi Survivor. I honestly think that this may have been one of my favorite experiences of 2023, and I really want to put it in that Game of the Year conversation, but I have trouble doing that because of the fact of how it launched and how poorly it performed in so many pivotal moments. Resident Evil 4 Remake, another experience that was genuinely received well from audiences, but the problem is that microtransactions, that's something that I don't think was in the original, and I don't know why it's found acceptable nowadays, but I guess that's just the nature with all of these remakes. Call of Duty years ago did that with Call of Duty 4, which I just find absolutely insane. Another game, Dying Light 2, this released I think around 2022, about 1.5 years later. It got a premium shop, and as everybody would expect, it was review bombed on Steam because of this. Ubisoft has explored AI dialogue because, yes, they want to make their experiences even more soulless and lifeless. Square Enix has doubled down on blockchain gaming, which has taken a tumble here in 2023. I don't know what avenue that this company is taking overall with a lot of the decisions that they've been making lately. 343 was hit with mass firings as the Halo brand has sunk. And the one big thing about Halo that I found very interesting, that when they had this huge Xbox Activision Blizzard trial, all the documents were leaking and such, the one thing that was not brought up at all about Halo was a future. There's nothing that seems to be on the horizon past Infinite, and I don't know if I'm really feeling that bad about that, because I don't trust 343 Industries with making a quality Halo experience. Yes, they've had some great moments with Infinite in the last couple weeks and months, but I just don't think that they can make a quality experience, the same way I don't know if Bungie could make a great Halo game nowadays. Epic Games fired over 900 developers as Fortnite is starting to slow. The Fall Guys developers were heavily impacted because yes, this was one of the big acquisitions that Epic Games made, I believe about a year or so ago, and now the Fall Guys team starts to feel that impact. Fortnite was always going to start to slow. That was just something that I think a lot of us accepted. It just took a lot longer than I think most of us expected. Now the thing is with Epic Games is that they've been laughing at some of the rivals and such with their, let's just say, their mass departures and layoffs and such, and now they're starting to do that exact same thing. Which is why I do kind of find it hilarious how Epic Games has made it out to be that they're this one noble part of this video game industry, but now we're starting to see their greedy face, which is why I was always skeptical about Tim Sweeney and his case against Apple, because I definitely always assumed that he really wanted them to be a monopoly throughout this entire industry, and I think he's proved it with a lot of the actions that he's taken the last couple of weeks. Telltale Games, yes, they recently came back alive, and now they have suffered mass layoffs. The Expanse likely underperformed because of these layoffs, and a former developer could not speak on if Wolf Among Us 2 is still in production, but Telltale did put out a statement saying that it is still alive. I think Telltale's biggest error was going to a Expanse prequel of sorts. I don't know if there was genuine interest in a project like that. Regardless, it's quite clear that project did not do well enough for them. The Callisto Protocol, one of the big releases last year, which was a massive disappointment for many, well, the CEO quit the company, and the studio suffered mass layoffs due to the flop. Sega has canceled the yet-to-be-released live service shooter Hyenas, and mass layoffs were hit at Creative Assembly after this. Immortals of Avium fired half of its staff after that game flopped. Another release that I don't know why it released this year. Probably should have been pushed back a lot longer. Releasing right between, I think it was Baldur's Gate 3 and Starfield, just was a bad decision overall, especially for a new IP which really didn't have a lot of hype or anticipation or discussion about it. Evil Dead devs halted development, canceling a Switch port just 16 months after launch, and then Unity annihilated the indie game scene with a greed-driven decision to try and get extra revenue from giant mobile games. This again is referring to the fact that they were going to charge users or charge developers for every install. They've since gone back a little bit on that, but there's still a lot of genuine dissatisfaction with how Unity has handled all of this, and a lot of them just not trusting them moving forward, which I think is a smart decision because I think they've proven that they can't be trusted. Payday 3, its always online requirement became a nightmare at launch as servers, well, they launched broken. BioWare fired over 50 developers, including longtime veterans, and Dragon Age 4 is now ditching its original identity, which has a lot of people skeptical about the direction that BioWare is taking with it. I think Baldur's Gate 3 has proven that you can stick to the original DNA, have great success, but I can understand why EA wants this to be a more casual, friendly experience, which I think for a lot that love this franchise and fell in love with Dragon Age Origins especially, may be disappointed with this new direction. Marvel's Avengers is dead, and actually I think it's going to be delisted in the coming days, and it will not be available on digital stores, which should make you fearful about the future of this industry, especially with how they've been handling game preservation. Yes, we are talking about Marvel's Avengers, but we're already seeing across this industry many developers foregoing physical launches and releases. So imagine the future in which you can't play certain games just because of the fact they were delisted after a terrible launch or some other controversial or licensing issue that emerges. Madden 23 launched with many issues and even had pro athletes trash it, which that's kind of been the sentiment with a lot of these sports franchises the last couple of years, even with the newest launch, Madden 24. NBA 2K24 was a buggy, greedy mess, becoming the worst reviewed game on Steam, which is well deserved, even more so than Overwatch in my opinion. But unfortunately, this game, NBA 2K24, it has its audience, and these people are still going to be back there every single year giving Take-Two Interactive money for that slot machine casino. I mean, that's what it pretty much is. It's a gambling simulator. That's the best way to describe it. Far Cry 6 got a Game of the Year edition despite getting 0 Game of the Year awards. Don't even know what to say about that one. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet sold huge after having a buggy, broken launch. You saw the tweets, you saw the memes online. Didn't matter because Nintendo still made tons of money from it. Skyrim Anniversary Edition launched broken on the Switch for $70. Bethesda was very slow with trying to fix that one up. And then Babylon's Fall, another, I think, Square Enix title, was shut down less than 6 or so months after launch. The multiplayer, I think, servers came offline a while ago. Just another experience that will be forgotten and put in the dust, but it also shows the problem with this industry with pushing forward and sticking to these live service entries. And that's actually the future of this industry and the problems that we have on the horizon, because recently Jim Ryan stepped down. A lot of reports have indicated that the one area that he could not get right was live services. And that is something that Sony is going to have trouble with in the future, because recurrent consumer spending is what everybody seems to be focused on. When I mean everybody, I mean these AAA game publishers. In the future, though, these are some of the controversial stuff on the way. We have Beyond Good and Evil 2. Lead developers just keep on leaving. That looks like it's vaporware at this point. Skull and Bones continues to be a mess based on a lot of the playtests that have leaked. We'll see if that ever actually releases. Fable gameplay had a lot of outrage because of the direction that Playground Games took with some of the character models, especially the female protagonist that was on the screen. A lot of people deeming it very ugly. And then when you compare it to the voice actress or the actress that was portraying the character, which is very weird, some of the decisions that the development team has made. And that's why a lot of people feel very angry, not necessarily with Fable specifically, but the Western video game industry, with how they make a lot of female characters look just not great, and their design. The Last of Us multiplayer project continues to be an absolute mess. Contractors have been fired, and the project is reportedly on ice. This comes, I think, months after another report emerged in which Bungie had apparently been brought in to check out the project, and yeah, they gave a thumbs down on that one. Naughty Dog is having a lot of trouble getting it right, and actually one of the recent big news pieces about the game was that the monetization expert, I think that they worked at Epic Games before, on the Battle Pass was brought in, and they have recently left. Rocksteady, their Suicide Squad game, continues to look horrible. The gameplay that was brought about earlier on this year did not inspire much hope about it, because it looks like Marvel's Avengers just with DC heroes. That's the best way I can describe it. What also doesn't inspire much hope is that a lot of lead developers and even the studio's co-founders and studio head left mid-development. That game just feels like it's destined for the next live service disaster that we're talking about in 2024. And then we also have KOTOR Remake. That was something that was highly anticipated based on the announcement at a recent PlayStation showcase, and it looks like the development of that game has been an absolute disaster. Another game under the Embracer umbrella. It has switched developers, going from Aspire Media to Saber Interactive, both studios that have no experience with RPGs, especially of this scale and size and reputation, and everything what we've been hearing about the game's development just feels like it's going to inevitably be another vaporware situation like Beyond Good and Evil 2, and you could also probably bring up Star Citizen. So no, I don't think that this project will see the light of day, but you know what could have been awesome is a fan remake. Oh yeah, that was shut down by Lucasfilm. Unfortunate, right? Ultimately, there's always going to be controversial stuff that happens within this video game industry. Every year we have it, but 2023 has been a lot of it. I understand the layoffs. A lot of this is, of course, connected to the fact that a lot of these development staffs were overstaffed because of the pandemic, but it's also, you look at the amount of studios, especially new coming studios, that are tumbling after chasing trends. And that's why I do look again to Baldurs Gate 3 and the example that that game has set, because I think it perfectly personifies how to do games properly. And no, I'm not actually talking about the contents of the game, the design of the structure, but what Baldur's Gate 3 represents in terms of sticking to a game's identity and giving players what they want, listening to what players want, and not chasing in different directions and stuff that we're probably going to see with the new Dragon Age experience. And Rocksteady chased that live service money, and now I just genuinely I don't even know what their future is after their Suicide Squad game, which honestly, I think it really is set for that dumpster fire that we saw with Marvel's Avengers a couple of years back. It's just so unfortunate that you can just see so many of these beloved studios, beloved franchises, and you just know inevitable failures on the way because of horrendous decisions that were made at the top level by executives that are looking at the live service money that Fortnite's rolling in and GTA Online. They're not understanding that just creating a quality experience that players love more often than not is good enough. That's all you need. Well, actually, let me rephrase that, because having a good enough game really isn't good enough here in 2023, because it is all about satisfying investors. That's what many of these corporations are all about. So having a successful launch, selling about 4 to 6 million sales, that's good enough for maybe Baldurs Gate 3, but for the likes of Fallout, Elder Scrolls, FIFA, NBA 2K, Call of Duty, that is a disaster. That's why microtransactions, monetization is only going to increase with these games. That's why the normalization does have me fear for what the future of this industry will look like in terms of how much money is required to just have a good time with those games. And when you look at Elden Ring and Baldur's Gate 3, what they represent, what they do very similar, is the fact that they respect players' wallets and their time. And I think a lot of developers could learn from that, because right now modern gaming is on the decline, and I genuinely don't think a lot of the executives, the people that are in charge, are caring too much about how a lot of things are floundering and falling apart, especially in terms of the live service trend chasing that just continues to be a problem. Anyway, what do you make of this video game industry the last year or so? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below, but thank you for watching. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this video, or if you found any informative value, and consider subscribing for more videos like this, and I'll see you later.